I'd like to first thank you all for the 100... Wait, who is that? The 110 subscribers I recently reached. Hello again, my comrades, and today I'll be building and painting this ISU-122 from Acrylic, a Wargames model kit, which is, albeit simplified and very quick and easy to build. These kits are very fun to practice on and to experiment with when you don't want to accidentally ruin or do a specific paint job on one of your more fancy and detailed models. Now we can begin building together the model with our sharp side screw cutters, and this build is, well, it's very short, as you can see here later on. I know I don't have to glue this model since it's a Wargames model and it's a very nice and easy snap fit together, but I just use Tamiya's liquid cement to make sure the parts are very securely bonded. When you're removing mold lines, make sure you don't want to use a very sharp edged tool that'll scrape off the plastic entirely, which is what you don't want, which is why you want to lightly graze over the mold line and to use sandpaper to softly sand it down and to make it smooth. Now we can use Vallejo's 100% acrylic resin plastic putty to help give me a nice rough armor texture that is seen on the casting armor of these Russian tanks, which almost seem like they were sculpted out of clay. And here you see the rough armor texture on this photo of a Russian T-26. Now just look at how uneven and textured that is. That's no Photoshop. To prime the model, I use Vallejo's Surface Primer, which is also a nice alternative on brush painting on, and making sure that you don't wait too long so that it will give you brush strokes, which is what you don't want when you're brush painting on primer, and it will nicely adhere and be hardened once you let it dry for maybe 2 days or 1 day, but here I just let it dry for a few hours. I created my own mud texture with thick model glue used for model scenery and dirt found in the garden. And as you mix the two in, even with water of your choosing, which is completely optional, I mixed all three together to get a nice even mud texture, so that I'll apply it to the tracks since they only have such limited detail. For our first base coat layer, we use refractive green, which is a nice dark rich green, and it is perfect for what I think for one of the many olive green or slightly lighter olive green or yellow green, all types of greens and Russians that you would see on their tanks. Now I can try some highlights with some Iraqi sand and refractive green, both mixed together, with adding more Iraqi sand than refractive green, so that it'll at least give you a nice lighter base than what you had before. It's up to your choosing if you wanted to make it slightly lighter or a very pale version of refractive green. To add more color variation, I added in some green brown, which is almost a yellow tint to it, which will help differentiate the colors and certain parts of the model so that it won't look almost too different. Now we can use Tamiya's Flat Earth XF52 to help give us a nice base for weathering for painting on the tracks. It'll nicely cover the mud texture that we applied on earlier. It really helps giving us a good idea of what I want to be weathered and what will not be weathered, as you will see later on. To use this satin varnish, I just slapped it on in very nice thin layers, or even in this case just one layer, so that it'll evenly cover the model. Later on you will see why I applied this satin varnish, as next I will be making my signature acrylic wash that's adjustable with natal black and flat brown, or if any color of your choosing that you're trying to make a wash out of, and I mix it both together to give me a nice dark brown along with the soap and water. This concoction is great if you love the non-smelling and very matte effect that it gives, especially from Tamiya paints. I'm sorry if you hate the smell of soap, but this is very effective and I highly recommend it. And to remove the excess paint, I just use a moistened cotton bud with water to remove any large amounts and any areas that I don't want this acrylic wash to be left in. This is an optional stage if you choose your colors are too overwhelming between your main base coat. And here I use German Camouflage Black Brown from Viejo, so that helped me give me not only the saturated tone, or at least to tone down the effects of my highlights, but also gave me fake shadows and possible streak and grime. All I use for the light chipping effect is this light grayish green from AK, or as it says on their Bing, but I believe this also comes from a modern paint set for, desert tan and also for the olive green, but I think this works perfectly as our light chipping base color, as it will be adding darker steel chips and more rusty chips to add more interest to the model. Now for the darker, more rusty chips, I use chocolate brown to help give the variation in tone that the oxidization effect has taken place on the armor. As you saw there, I use the retarder medium from Viejo so that the paint doesn't dry so fast once we start using the sponge chipping technique. Now for some fun with the rust, I use Mahogany Brown, which is almost like this reddish brick brown, which I give a nice effect on not an abandoned tank, but if you want to add more interest and differentiation of the model so that it have a nice color variation of the rust chips and possibly streak and grime. Now for some more rust, of the light rust, I used the ochre brown so that a slight utter buildup of the rust, I know I've been saying that a lot, will be very different from the darker brown and the red tones. To create a nice cool metal effect without any metallics, I use neutral gray and dark Prussian blue so that any exposed metal or any tools or anything else that is metal, especially like the tracks, if you aren't planning to have the tracks as weathered as mine are, then this is excellent for giving that nice cool metal effect, which you can also make it really pop out by using a graphite pencil. Now for the markings, as you saw in my last video on mainly Russian tanks that are in the battle for Berlin, that have the white stripe markings. And here you kind of see me struggle a little bit to try and be steady and paint on these markings, especially the tactical numbers. I mixed together both Tamiya Deck Tan and Buff to get a nice light dust wash, as I wanted to build up in the corners. But unfortunately, later on I made a grave mistake of mixing in Desert Yellow, which I did not add on more soap, which for some reason that slipped my mind when I added on my same soap and water acrylic mixture. And it ended up, in my opinion, being too much of an effect. But I'll let you be the judge of that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time, which on this ISU's brother, which, trust me, will be a lot better.